live from the Framingham State University Entrepreneur Innovation Center. This is BeanTown Business Talk.
Well, we have another beautiful day of podcasting here today at the Entrepreneurship Innovation Center. I'm your co-host, Alex Owen, joined by the main host, Matt Brockett. He's 90% man, 9% mortadella, and 1% blood, sweat, and tears. How are you doing today, Matt?
Well, I'm doing great. You know, for any of our audience members, I'm 9% mortadella, according here to Alex Owen. And you got to say mortadella with an Italian accent like that, like, you know, your Uncle Tony in the deli. That's a fine cured meat, and when you're in my household, whew, you better expect to find a lot.
That's on me for mispronouncing it because, you know, I'm just a young Irish kid. Don't have much Italian genes in me. I did my best, though.
Listen, you've been having corned beef hash shoved down your throat your whole life, all right? Not mortadella. I get it.
Yeah, St. Patty's Day is like Christmas to me.
God bless.
But anyways, we're on to episode 10 here. We got another current topic going on, as we like to stay current with things. Matt, what we got discussing today?
Yeah, so episode number 10. So now we're in double digits, like Alex said, and the topic today is going to be the biggest hurdles that recent college graduates face entering the workforce. And it's really going to be a kind of a segue into our last episode, or a segue from our last episode, I should say. And it's another timely one. It's another current one. Framingham State's graduation is coming up this weekend. There are a lot of other graduations that were this past weekend. And this is just really a timely and really a current issue that we'd like to dive right into.
Which is great also because Matt actually just started his first week in his brand new job. First official real world type of job, I should say.
You know, I've been dodging the real world for a while now. I'm 24 years old. When I was done 2 years ago at FSU with my undergrad, I was 22. And, you know, at that point I said, oh my God, is my life done, so to speak? And I was able to kind of bleed out 2 more years, but 2 more very solid years. Played another year of baseball, MBA, was able to make it work. So I'm blessed. And yeah, we started on Monday, and that was a good first day. And then day 2, we took like a field trip to Worcester. So we're diving in.
Do they call it field trips in the real world now?
I guess I shouldn't call it that. I mean, it isn't school anymore.
It's like a yellow school bus over to Worcester, huh?
Yeah, we did. It was what can I tell you about that?
All right, so let's kick it off, I guess. What we got in this discussion? We have biggest hurdles for recent graduates entering the workforce. What are some of these hurdles?
Well, all right, so hurdle number 1, and this is a consistent one that I think you'll see across the board, but it's an issue pertaining to feedback. So any student that's been in school for a while, the feedback that a lot of times that they receive is pretty clear and it's pretty consistent. Day 1, or maybe week 1, a lot of college students refer to as syllabus week. And they love that week because, well, you really got nothing to do.
No homework.
But the syllabus is laying out the ground rules. It's very clearly and explicitly showing students how they're graded, and it presents the feedback right there. And then along the way, when they give presentations or work on projects, whatever it might be, the professor, if they're good, and at Framingham State and a lot, at that point, they're pretty well decorated, and a lot of the professors are good. There's a few that maybe that does not apply to, but the feedback is clear, it's consistent, it's timely, it's weekly, it's either written or said.
It's a guided process.
It is. However, once you transition to the workforce, depending on your manager, the feedback is not always going to be there. And Harvard Business Review articles make a clear focus on that. That really it depends on your manager, because a lot of times, especially nowadays, managers are going away from being micromanagers. In fact, nowadays, the workplace is much less formal, not a lot of ties, not a lot of suits, and managers are taking away that formality of having to micromanage. But the one issue with that is maybe they're not providing such clear feedback on things. And that is where we start to see students then transition to becoming employees struggle with it because they're not getting that feedback on a daily basis.
And the last thing you want to see in that first quarterly review is that you haven't been doing well. You might have thought you've been doing well, but all of a sudden you get this feedback and you're like, what have I been doing wrong? How can I fix this? What needs to be addressed?
Exactly. Absolutely. And feedback is so crucial that it should be a two-way street, though. Whether you're a student and it's a professor-student relationship, or you're an employee and it's an employee-boss or manager relationship, that's got to be a constructive feedback going in both directions. And for a new employee, sometimes they feel a little nervous or timid to give feedback. you should be able to, you should welcome feedback from your boss, but also say, hey, I think we might be able to change maybe this process by doing X, Y, and Z. And don't be afraid to say that.
Yeah, it's all about having that. There's an element of freedom, I should say, that you have going into it nowadays, where you put in your own work, and what you get out of that work, you own it. Any recommendations you make with your boss, you're in charge, especially like when it comes to like sales or other roles like that, where you're making the pitch, not them. They can lay down the groundwork, so they can hold a meeting every Monday and kind of discuss strategies. But once the lights come on, that's all you, and that's on you completely.
100%. Everybody kind of has their own way of doing things, how they operate, and their own process in any type of job. There's really not one right way to do things. Where in school, sometimes there is, if it's a standardized test or there's certain criteria that the professor is looking for, that's clear feedbacks and there's clear metrics on how you're measured. In the workplace, there's not, sometimes there are. If you're in sales, there are really clear metrics.
Yep.
But in other roles, there's not necessarily clear metrics. It's, well, I like Matt. I think he's a pretty good employee. Should we promote him? Maybe. But they don't always have the very concrete metrics or feedback, and that's missing. So you should go. If your one recommendation for any young student or young employee now is, if your manager is not one to give great feedback, or they're very closed off, maybe don't have an open door policy, respectfully request to have a meeting with them or set something up, maybe on a weekly basis, to say, hey, how am I doing? How am I performing? They're going to respect you taking that initiative, and you're going to grow as a professional.
It's all about taking initiative, all about being proactive in your decisions, and kind of being your own guide for the success you want to create for yourself.
That's it.
And it's all about creating successful relationships. And another thing we're struggling to see is relationships in the workforce, the cultural transitions of different relationships between maybe colleagues you don't like necessarily, but you have to work with them and have to find different ways to work with them. That's one big issue that we're starting to see as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in school, a lot of your peers you're very close to your age. They have similar interests as you, and professors try. And I personally, and the statistics in Harvard Business actually back this fact up. A lot of professors will make the excuse and say, well, I'm going to do a group project because it's going to teach you how to work well with others, because you're going to have to do that in the workplace. And that sounds all well and good, and in theory it does. But the stats and the research done does not back up that argument that professor's making. Because when you get to the workforce, right, there's people of all different walks of life, different backgrounds, different ages. The gaps and the differences are vast. Whereas when you're in college, you have some differences, but you have much more in common than you do somebody that you're working with, especially right off the bat.
Yeah, and that common agreement you have working with people your age, there's going to be disagreements between different age gaps and cultural gaps. So there's not going to be like a scenario where it's just one person taking the lead, everyone else is fine with it, maybe freeload. People are going to want to put in their own inputs, and they're going to have different ideas. So it's going to be kind of like a balance of trying to find those ways to make everything cohesive and work well.
Absolutely. We see people close to our age in their early to mid-20s, in that millennial type generation. Yeah, the research says that they know how to work well with each other most of the time in work-related or school-related projects. But when it comes to working with people outside of their age group, they struggle with. And the most important thing is they're not really making the effort to make that work. You're going to be working when your first job, you might be working with people much older than you. Or if you go for a graduate degree, you're going to be working with people much older than you. Same thing. It's that real-world experience like that is going to help you not only from a working standpoint, but even an emotional one, to be able to have those interpersonal skills to relate with people your age, older than you, younger than you. That's such a crucial thing to be able to do to build a successful career.
And it's all important. Especially you want to be as open as possible in the workforce. Use everyone else's network and really take advantage of your surroundings. Because if you're closed off, it's only going to make it that much harder for you. There's a certain point where you do your self-work and that's all on you. But when you have to be collective as a group, you really need to be sociable with everyone and kind of, just really put yourself out there, which many people are not used to just from having it easy in school.
Alex, I couldn't agree with you more with that. And aside from relationships, which obviously are important, and feedback we talked about before that, both very, very important. Another one which is equally, if not more important, is this, and this is a buzzword, especially nowadays, is accountability and self-accountability, especially in school, in any class. Yes, it's important to be accountable, but if you get something wrong or you're struggling on a particular project or assignment, it's, and this might be harsh to say, but it really is true. When you're in school or in college, it really is kind of fantasy land. You're you know what I mean? You're perfecting and fine-tuning your skills to eventually go out in the workforce. You are. So in this collegiate fantasy world, for lack of a better word, when you do something wrong or commit an error on an assignment, whatever it might be, your professor is much more lenient to say, oh, that's okay, Alex. That's okay, Matt. It's all right, Jimmy. Don't worry about it. And they kind of pat you on the back, and maybe they'll reward you for your hard work, which is great. It is. But when you get to the workforce, it's kind of a dog-eat-dog environment. It's not as lenient. Everybody's out for themselves in some jobs. That doesn't mean that, yes, there are plenty that are very welcoming, and we're not saying that, but the profits and the money and the results speak in any workforce. They really do. And I want to stress on Alex is starting a new role in a sales and business development capacity starting June 10th, which he's graduating May 26th, this coming Sunday.
Coming up.
Unbelievable turnaround. That's a 2 or 3 week turnaround for him having a job. Really is unbelievable. And in that role, I think what he's going to find out is that sales is great, and you're going to learn the company from the ground up. It's an awesome place to start. And the thing about sales, though, and my connection here to accountability is that in school, you could tell a professor, hey, I really worked so hard on this, but I know the result isn't great. You're going to get no problem for the most part. If you tell your boss, hey, I've really been working hard on this, but if you don't meet that sales quota, okay, maybe once or twice he'll look the other way or he'll give you some advice. But if you're consistently not hitting those results or those numbers or those sales quotas, your boss is going to have an issue with that. The results and the money speaks for themselves, and you have to be accountable.
Yeah, it's not a Nintendo game by any means. You got to run out of lives real fast, and there's no restart option. One thing that came to my mind as you were talking about that is in group presentations in school. Such a key example of how people can get away with that real easy, and then once that turns over to the workforce, it's legit. The repercussions are going to hit you. If you're going to a presentation in school, professor asks a question, the whole group is up there not saying anything, they don't know the answer. You do that in front of a sales pitch to a sales board, you're not going to get the sale. You're going to be left standing up there like an idiot, and you're going to go home feeling real bad about it because you're not going to walk away with a B+ just because you mess up on one slide.
Yeah, there's that saying about the war is won before the first battle even begins. And in the sales role, that quote is very true because it's all about preparation. If you don't prepare, know the numbers, know who you're meeting with, know their personalities, how to really make that sale, not only from a selling perspective, but what do they want to buy? What are the buyers thinking? You got to put yourself in their shoes and be accountable not only for you but also for them. Yeah, there's a lot, and that's very, very rewarding in an extremely interesting field. You just have to be very, very accountable. You have to be aware of that.
Absolutely. I hope for all the college graduates that maybe didn't put their best work into one presentation, hopefully they obviously flip the switch once they get into the actual workforce and they really take it seriously because it needs to be taken seriously because turnover is very high these days. So you got to be sharp. You got to be ready. So Matt, I know that you did a huge presentation on this at the Warren Center in Ashland. A big piece of it was millennials entering the workforce, and you kind of broke that down. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I think it certainly directly ties into this podcast, which is why we wanted to talk about it. So this was one that had started this past summer of 2018. I worked with fellow marketing professor, I should say, Dr. Michael Harrison, who is, I would say, the absolute heartbeat of the campus. He's involved in athletics, academics, advising. I mean, he does it all. Used to be the director of the MBA program, really does it all for Framingham State. And what I did for this presentation was we did research over the last summer of 2018, and we wanted to determine what were employers in the Metro West, how do they view millennials entering the workforce? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? But if it's negative, we really want to know and be able to present about it. So we presented, and what we found was through some of the focus groups and surveys that we found, what employers said was the number one reason why they liked this area for millennials entering the workforce was for the labor quality. They said that was a positive, and you could see why. Very good institutions in the Northeast, absolutely. Highly educated, sure. But then also the biggest negative of millennials entering the workforce, surprisingly, was also labor quality. And why? So it was like a double-edged sword. And we were like, man, why is this? What they were saying was, for the negative point of that, was there was a clear skills gap with the millennial generation or our generation entering the workforce. What they meant by a skills gap, literally, not to get too technical about it, was they were saying that, okay, people our age at school, we're learning a lot of skills and a lot of different things in classes. Great. But those skills are not necessarily what employers are looking for in their business. So there's a clear gap of, well, I graduated, now where's my job? Oh, well, we're not looking really for the skills that you got, that you learned. And that's kind of tragic. So some of these skills were really broken down into two things: technical skills and soft skills. The technical skills only represented 15% of the skills gap. These were things like specific certifications and credentials and trade skills. So the credentials being things in like HR or project management, healthcare experience, accounting, knowing accounting principles. But the biggest of that, and maybe surprisingly to some, were the soft skills that we talked about. So millennials, to break this down in our generation, what employers are saying in their point of view about us really is that they think that we lack the soft skills to really be successful in the workforce. They think we have and these were quotes from employers that we got in focus groups with them, was that there was a lack of professionalism, constantly on social media, not staying up to date with their tasks. They had a poor business etiquette. We had one story of an etiquette where somebody came in, a newly hired person, they were there for about a couple of weeks, wanted to ask their boss a pressing question. Well, at 9:01 in the morning, they barge right into their boss's office, start firing away questions. Now, maybe to the average listener, you're like, well, that doesn't really sound that bad. But there's an etiquette. You have to start with like pleasantries. Hey, how's everything going? How's the family? Blah, blah. Small talk at first. Don't go in at 9:01. The guy's just having his cup of coffee.
He's getting his bearings.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And it's shocking things that we were like, man, wow. And a lot of people were saying that. And other things like unable to take feedback. We talked about feedback earlier. Having a poor work ethic. This is actually from a millennial in this, said, yeah, sometimes it seems like our generation has it handed to us, and the older generation recognizes that. So that was very, very interesting to see. And overall, the point of this presentation that we eventually gave it in late November was we were presenting it to not only business executives and educational executives, but there was a lot of politicians and legislators there. So really the whole point of this was legislators, politicians, hey, we are presenting you some negatives that employers feel about millennials entering the workforce. Is there anything from a political or educational standpoint that we can do to change that? And that's still a work in progress. That's a loaded question to ask.
A lot of components in that.
Exactly. But it was cool to be able to do. And yes, I mean, the technical skills are great, but overall those softer skills, having an etiquette, knowing how to conduct yourself in an interpersonal way, not just in a technical way, can take you a long way. It's unbelievable.
Exactly. And from my personal experiences in work, I've always been more friends with my boss, honestly, than I have been like as just them being my superior. Mark Hardy here is great, but we have great conversation just outside of the workday. And then one of my former bosses at a baseball facility I used to work at, just pop in, say what's up, be on his way. There isn't much like command over the employees in those like very early jobs where you're just starting out, you're 17, 18. You know, professionalism isn't immediately taught. It's learned. It's kind of just based on your manners and how you're brought up, honestly, and your just overall awareness going into the workforce. So it's definitely a huge problem that we're starting to see. And I know you brought up social media, and obviously the millennials are the biggest users of social media. People, Matt, you always joke that you're a fossil, you say. An ancient rock, you called yourself once.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Which is honestly a blessing. So you're not going to be worried about scrolling through Twitter during the job day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I got nothing for you, but it's true. Yes.
And that's not a roast by any means. You just aren't as engaged in the social media as other people are. And there's a social media skill set where people are looking for those types of jobs, and companies want to connect more with the millennials because that's the culture that's happening.
For sure.
But, if you're on Instagram when you should be doing your financial reports, then that's just not ideal.
And it's funny. It's actually funny to hear that and listen to it verbally, a sentence like that, because anyone listening is going to say like, yeah, dude, duh, obviously I'm not going to do that. But you'd be surprised that we're not just two dudes in a room talking about this. I mean, this is real life things that Harvard Business Review Journal articles back up, and about 4.5 months of Metro West research with 600 employers in the area back up. And they're saying in focus groups to us, yeah, millennials, and not all, and this is not a roast of millennials by any means, even though
we are millennials.
We are ourselves. It's more to point out.
That's why we can talk about it like this.
Exactly. It's more to point out, be aware of those things. They're going to key in on, can this person conduct himself, yes, in a technical, within their job. Can they do their job description? Great. But that's not just your role. You also need to be aware of how are you interacting, how are others perceiving you. That's very, very important. And what employers are saying across the board, at least in this region, is some millennials just don't got it. So it's important to recognize.
Yeah, it's important to call yourself out. A lot of these things are habitual. Obviously, people are in class. Half the kids in the room, you look around, they're all on their computers, they're all on their phones. A lot of them aren't even taking the lesson in seriously, which they don't even need to, just because that's how college works. They have all the resources online post-class, and they can really just take control from that aspect. But once they're in the room, it's kind of relative to how work is. Like, you're there 9 to 5, you're going to have that temptation to look at your phone because some of it's monotonous work, but it needs to be done.
100%. And in any role, any entry-level position, no matter how high up maybe in the food chain you might be, oh yeah, there's going to be things that you don't want to do or people maybe you don't even want to deal with. But that's all part of it. And school is hopefully teaching a little bit of that. And yeah, you need to be able to make adjustments on the fly in any type of role and be able to conduct yourself in a professional way. It's so crucial.
Yeah, so that's basically our spiel that we got on millennials entering the workforce, the problems they're seeing, the culture that's there that they're presenting to different cultures that are already within the workforce, the age gaps, all that stuff all ties in.
100%. And really, let's do a quick rundown here. Quick recap in closing, so to speak. The biggest hurdles that recent college graduates are facing right now, sure, in that millennial generation. One, we mentioned feedback. School, you get daily, consistent feedback. In the workplace, depending on your manager or your job description, sometimes that feedback isn't just coming. In school, it's just kind of coming naturally. You got to sometimes go get that and ask for that feedback. And that's what some people don't do, and that's why maybe they tend to struggle or get a little anxious with their jobs, understandably. Second is relationships. In college, people similar your age, similar interests, yeah, it's easier to kind of get along and maybe get things done. But in the workforce, different age groups, backgrounds, ethnicities, likes, dislikes, a lot of more differences. You got to pull those differences aside and really try to work that out on any type of project you're working on. And that could be a struggle. That could be a hurdle. Next, then we talked about accountability. I think of that self-explanatory. I really do. But it's important to be said, though. Accountability, your boss, this is not fairy world, fairy dust anymore. It's not. A company is relying on you to come in daily and do the best you can. And if you aren't, well, you're going to hear about it more than maybe you did in school,
Exactly.
And then lastly is some of those soft skills. And we think it's important to note this is not a millennial generation roast, although it sounds like it a little bit, but it's not.
It's based on studies.
Exactly. It really is. So lastly, are those soft skills, business etiquette, a work ethic? Do you have those interpersonal skills? Your IQ is just as important as your EQ or your EI, your emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. All right, and speaking of that, the IQ versus EQ, or some people call it EI, Alex, this was episode 10. Our next episode, episode 11, is going to feature that very topic right there. We're going to discuss your IQ versus your EQ. So what's more important? And this is a hot debate right now, especially amongst our generation, because people are going after more of those interpersonal creative jobs. Well, in a job like that, you got to be able to conduct yourself socially and emotionally. So what's more important? Is it going to be your IQ and just strictly what you know? Or is it your EQ and how you lead, how you motivate, how you read people, even how you empathize? Both are important, or is the best somewhere in the middle? That is what we are going to discuss on episode 11. So stay tuned for that episode. Your IQ versus your EQ. We're going to dive right in.
And we did an Instagram poll, folks. What do you like better, the interviews or discussions? We're not going to stop doing interviews by any means. But you guys would 69% discussions versus 31% interviews. So you want discussions, you're going to get some more discussions, folks.
Discussions, folks, are coming at you. So stay tuned. This was episode 10 for Alex Irwin. I am Matt Brockett. Stay tuned for episode 11. Thank you all so much.
And God bless.